classical economic system is compatible with zero or negative growth. Because it seems to me there's a real, I mean, I think capitalism is probably the best system we've got going at the moment, with lots of regulation that kind of roll the same. You're talking about, I'm not sure it's compatible with zero or negative growth, because growth is an essential part of the business cycle and how businesses work. So there seems to be sort of a really deep contradiction between saying, yes, I'm a social democrat, we can make this stuff work, and saying, and we've got to get to something like a steady state growth system.
Yes, I get a lot of sympathy with that comment. I think the concept of zero growth is highly questionable if we are going to provide employment, work and opportunities for people across the economy and across society. But I do think this, that there's growth and growth. There is growth which is ruthlessly destructive of the environment, ruthlessly destructive of labour standards, ruthlessly destructive of the developing countries. Now, it's the nature of growth that needs to change, and I don't think we should be aiming at Chinese or Indian type level growth, which has been going on for decades, 8-9%. The utilisation of the world's resources is simply not going to stand it. I mean, it's not just climate change, which is, I still think, grossly underestimated by the vast majority of people, including the world's leaders. Peak oil, particularly oil, but also probably rather longer gas, food and water shortages because of climate change, and the over-exploitation of natural resources. Now, these are, in the end, actually going to impose limitations on growth, whether we like it or not. The reason we've had this growth in the last 150 years is oil. Oil was found in Pennsylvania in 1859. We've had 150 years of it, and the economic productivity provided by oil has been enormous, absolutely enormous. Not only, of course, for transport, for aeroplanes and cars, which came into existence because of oil, but also, of course, in industry, in agriculture, and I have to say in fighting wars. And if we did not have oil, and in 50 years' time, okay, oil will never totally run out, but it'll be in such small quantities that most of us will never get our hands on it. I mean, in 50 years' time, we're talking about our grandchildren, which is it's a flicker of an eyelid in historical geological time. We're going to have to make do without oil. And there is no natural substance which has the maneuverability, the flexibility, and the cost which remotely compares to oil. So we are going to have to face this question of very low, if not zero, growth in the end. But I don't think we're at that point. What I do think is that we need to have what are called the externalities, the impact on the environment, the impact on standards, the impact on communities, written in to the economic costing of projects in business, so that these things are fully taken into account, so that if it in some way does damage the environment, either because of pollution or because of carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions, that is a cost to society, and it has to be written into the price of a product, which is going to reduce its attractiveness for potential consumers and make them think twice about whether they should look for alternatives. That's, I think, the way it's got to move. But what we really need is a major shift towards renewable sources of energy. Let me just ask you one final question. We are going to have problems about providing energy, as I say, particularly electricity and the price of oil for heating, electricity for all the reasons and purposes we know. We have more renewable energy available to us in this country because we're an offshore island, because of wind power, from Blackpool over the north of Scotland down to the North Sea. We've probably got more wind power capacity and wave and tidal power than any other country in Europe. What proportion of our electricity is made from renewable sources of energy? I'll come to that in a second. What proportion? 1%. It's 4. Pretty good. But let me just tell you this. In Germany, France, Italy, Spain, it's between 10 and 25%, when they have less opportunity than us. In Scandinavia, it's between 35 and 50% plus. So 4% is absolutely, utterly pathetic. I mean, we are doing nothing to use the potential for what is a much more environmentally harmonious way of creating energy. We have done almost nothing to improve our energy efficiency, to give incentives to industry, to transport, to private households to improve energy efficiency, or to use less energy. I mean, there are all sorts of ways in which there is a massive waste of energy. US power corporations discard more waste energy when they strike oil or gas than is sufficient to power the whole of the Japanese economy. Only 15% of the petrol in your car actually reaches the wheels. Only about the same amount, 15% of the gas on which you cook or which you buy in order to cook actually heats the food. The waste is absolutely enormous, and this is a way in which we do need to think about the nature of growth, the utilization of resources, as well as fairness. I think I've overrun my time, but did you want to ask something? No. Yeah, go on, quickly. If the next speaker wants to take over from me, I'll gladly yield, but...
Just on that point of how little renewable energy we use here, what is your theory as to why we're so poor? Why we're so pathetic in renewable energy? You said we only use 4% renewable energy and that's pathetic. Why is that? Is it that a kind of the power of the oil companies?
No, it's because, I'll tell you, it's a very good question again. It's because of the industrial economic muscle of the fossil fuel industry. We are not building, we are slowly, but very slowly building wind farms. But the reason we've done so little is because the oil industry, the coal industry, the gas industry has prevailed upon the politicians. It doesn't matter whether they're Tory Labour, they all take the same view. They support big industry against the interests of the British people. And that, again, is what's got to change.
Corruption and conspiracy, really.
Sorry?
It's corruption and conspiracy, really.
Well, they would call it industrial lobbying, but it sort of comes down to corruption. I quite agree. But